Goodbye Mother, a short story by Jonathan J. Gagan, based on two dreams that I had in one night. Part 1, Dog Man. We zoom in on a small New England home, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Duville, a family of immigrants who live by the sea. They have two sons, Patrov and Henry. Patrov, the older son, works in the shipyards with his father repairing broken down marine vessels. Henry has yet to apply himself. Patrov is 30 and young Henry a baby at the age of 21. Henry's father wishes that his son would begin working on boats like his brother, but Henry is inclined otherwise. The only problem is he has no idea what he is inclined to do. And so he comes home drunk at 1 in the morning every night, straight from the bar, smelling of cigarettes and hooch, and begins his usual spats with his mother, who is tired of these little arguments that keep popping up on the fly, largely due to the regrets of a father and mother who never wanted to have him in the first place. The upstairs light flicks on in Mr. Duville's bedroom. He and the rest of the residents are asleep as the hour is late and as he works over at the docks, and he and his son Patrov are early risers. He hears laughter and the stumbling of a drunken oaf down in the parlor. It's his son, Henry, returned from a late night of excess and waste. He's got two girls on either arm, hookers. He's looted his father's savings again, and he's in for a whooping. But Mr. Duville is a kind man prone to the weaknesses of the heart, and so he has never laid a hand on either of his sons, to the regret of their mother, who is more of a disciplinarian. "What in blue blazes are you doing, son? It's late, and I've boats to mend in the morning. Can't you take your lady friends elsewhere?" asked Mr. Duville to his son from the banister of the steps he built with his own hands. "Yeah, Pops," says Henry, clearly hammered. "Good night, son," replies the bewildered and anxious father. Henry stumbles to stand in his stupor. He laughs. The girls laugh with him. They sit him down as he's incapable to do so on his own. In the morning, the mother comes down to see a few of her priceless heirlooms from the old country gone missing. She inquires to Henry about the missing jewelry and silverware. "Maybe your friends took it. Henry, can't you go find them?" "Well, they must be somewhere in town." "No can do. They left just yesterday, headed to Florida. Won't be back for at least a year," says Henry, who's recovering and belligerent. "Oh, shat," replied Mr. Duville. "I ought to have it out on you. I never wanted you in the first place, you miserable ingrate." Mr. Duville raises a hand to stop her. "Now, Henry, you will pay your mother and I back for the missing jewelry and the silverware when you begin your work for me at the shipyards, won't you?" Henry, infuriated, screams in tantrum. "Well, I don't understand what I've got to do around here anyways. I'm going to the bar to get another drink. You leave me alone, old lady." He raises a fist to hit his mother, the father behind her, and then thinks better of it and stumbles out the door and into the street. Down at Sanders, Henry has had enough, he tells the bartender and a few of his drinking buddies. "That old lady is nothing but a witch, and she never wanted me in the first place." One of his drinking buddies, Sam, replies laughing, "Well, Henry, here's to the old lady." Mike smiles and raises his glass. "Aye." Later that night in a pawn shop, Henry decides to buy a revolver. "Yeah, I'll take that one, the one by the antique jewelry and the silverware." He comes home late that night, like usual, in his drunken rage, and he walks upstairs into the bedroom, points the gun at his father, and then moves it slightly to the left, shooting his mother, only to immediately regret what he has just done. His father and brother wake at the sound of the gunshot. Henry runs. As he treks through a creek bed on the south side of town, he decides to hitch a ride. So he sees in the flash of the headlights a bus that stops. It's mostly tourists. They're heading out west to see LA. Henry asks if he can catch a lift. Sure, replies the one old man and an old lady. I mean, it's not like you're wanted for murder, young man, are you? Henry laughs nervously. Now, what would give you that idea? He sits down next to an old lady who smiles at him as he hangs his coat, careful to hide the blood spatter. You look like Cary Grant. Doesn't he look like Cary Grant? I loved him in that one. Do you remember it, Jean? Yeah, replies Jean. It was Hot Saturday with Nancy Carroll. Loved it. Say, you wouldn't happen to be related, old chum. Henry thinks for a second, then smiles. Well, yeah. Say, he's my cousin. We used to play together all the time in... Oh, England. I believe Cary Grant's from England, said the man. You don't say, replies Henry. You don't say. Part 2. The Isle of Man. We come again on young Henry Duville, only this time in a much broader setting on the seashores of Los Angeles. He works in a shipyard repairing old sailboats. He spends most of his nights much the same. He's been on the run for 3 years, living incognito. He says he's Russian and that he doesn't speak good English. He mostly keeps to himself, though, with mild company from the ladies. He lives on a boat he purchased with the rest of his father's savings, which he had with him the night he murdered his mother in cold blood. He feels clean and comfortable, untouchable. We begin the scene where he's working on his own boat when a homeless woman swings by looking for trouble. Say, why do you mean touching me boat like that? Replies Henry. Get away from there. Geez, mister, you're so finicky about your boat. You mind if I could grab a bite to eat? Asks the homeless woman, acting sly. Henry thinks for a second. Should he trust her? Then he notices she's flirtatious and quite good-looking. He hasn't had company for a while, and she seems to mean no harm. Sure, replies Henry. He goes down below. As he's searching the cabin, he hears the woman say, Say, mister, where are you from anyways? I'm Russian, replies Henry. Well, you don't look Russian, replies the homeless woman. On my mother's side, replies Henry, still looking. That's when 2 detectives show up on the scene. They draw their guns. One of them points his at the homeless woman. Scram, he says. The lady departs. She doesn't want any trouble. Henry Duville, come out with your hands up, replies one of the detectives. Henry raises his hands above his head, only to use one of his raised arms to knock away the detective's gun. A shot is fired. A chase ensues. Henry loses them in a bar, the Blue Moon. He enters the establishment, cool and calm. The cops walk by, unaware they've been duped. Henry sits at the bar to have a drink. He orders bourbon on the rocks. A man is standing over at the other end of the bar, talking to some women folk. They're actors. Henry decides to interject. I told Hitch that we were gonna hit it big this year. Aye, replied the actor. Hey, excuse me, I'm wondering if you have a light, asked Henry. Oh, sure, pal. Say, what did you say your name was? Asked the actor. Name's Mark Etheridge. Say, you wouldn't happen to be talking about old Hitch, would you now? Replies Henry smoothly. Yeah, you know him? Asked the actor. Yeah, we worked on that film last August, asked Henry, unsure of himself. Notorious, replied the actor. Yeah, that was it, replies Henry. Yeah, I was in that too. Say, what part did you play? I don't remember seeing you on set. Name's Cary Grant, by the way, replies Grant. You don't say. Well, I was an extra, but I'm pretty good. Yeah, me and some of the crew were going to go to Fiji after this next film. Kind of treat ourselves, says Grant. Fiji? Why, you don't say, says Henry, smiling through his cigarette. Say, would you happen to know if Old Hitch is casting for any parts? I'd love to join. Oh yeah, replies Grant. Just come by the studio around 11. At this point, Henry hears a police siren outside the bar. He checks his coat is still there and looks to the door. You wouldn't happen to know where the studio is, replies Grant. 100 Universal City Plaza. See you at 11. Henry leaves the bar. Cary Grant turns to one of the actresses and says to her, What a wonderful fellow. Seemed nervous as heck, though. I hope he makes his first gig. As Henry enters the filming lot, he's shaking with nerves. But decidedly so, he puts out his cigarette and walks on set. Excuse me, he asks one of the cameramen who walks by him. You wouldn't know where I try out for parts, would you? The cameraman looks surprised. Sorry, auditions are closed. Try again next time, buddy. He sees Alfred Hitchcock walking by. Hey, Hitchcock, Alfred. Alfred Hitchcock looks intrigued. Robert, he says to the cameraman, could you excuse this young man? Yes, sir. Say, he said auditions are closed. They were supposed to schedule me in, but I got lost in Idaho. You wouldn't have time for a quick audition, would you? Smiled Henry. Go ahead, replied Alfred Hitchcock. Henry looks around. Say, you wouldn't happen to have a script, would you? Alfred Hitchcock smiles and taps Robert on the shoulder as he's passing. Script. Yes, sir, replies Robert. Robert comes back with a script. Go ahead, mister. Henry looks confused. Mark Effridge. Say, what's the film about? Matricide, replies Hitchcock. You will be auditioning for the role of the young son. Henry's face flashes with a look of guilt. Then he reads the short monologue. Oh, wherefore art thou the quiet sound of the night? For I have spoken ill of you this one last time. My dear, you lay in the crevices of hell, for you have done to me what ills. Very good, replied Hitchcock. Makeup was an hour ago. Robert? After filming, Henry waits to talk to Grant. So that trip to Fiji, he asks. Grant smiles. We already bought tickets. If you can afford it, you're welcome to come. Henry remembers his boats probably being watched by the cops. Unable to pay, he sees the two detectives off set. One of them spots him. They give chase. Back at the Blue Moon, Henry is getting very slammed when a young couple walk in, one of them carrying a suitcase. I know, Martha, it's just my producer wants me here, and I know how much you wanted to go to Fiji. Henry's ears perk up. He interjects. Say, how much would you want for those tickets to Fiji? Oh, they might as well be useless now, replies the man. Well, how much? asks Henry. Just give me what you got, replies the man. Henry empties his pockets. He's got $30. Here, he says, take it. He grabs the ticket and runs out into the street, avoiding traffic. Now on his way to Fiji, Henry stands at the back of the cruise ship and says with a final tone, almost the most regretful tone of his young life, Goodbye, Mother. The end.